The scissors gleamed in the afternoon light as Margaret Ellis lifted them to her hair, and the barber's apprentice standing beside her looked more nervous than she felt. Carson City, Nevada, had seen its share of desperate folks in the autumn of 1875, but something about the young woman in the worn calico dress made even the hardened gamblers and miners turn their heads as she walked through the door of Henderson's barber shop. Her chestnut hair fell past her waist in thick waves that caught the light streaming through the dusty windows, and her green eyes held a determination that spoke of someone who had made peace with a difficult choice. "You certain about this, miss?" The apprentice, a gangly boy of 16 named Thomas, shifted his weight from foot to foot. "That is mighty fine hair. Seems a shame to cut it." Margaret's fingers trembled only slightly as she gathered the heavy mass at the base of her neck. "I am certain. My sister needs medicine, and I need to buy bread. The wigmaker on 3rd Street said he would pay $15 for hair this length and color. $15 would buy medicine from the doctor, bread from Morrison's bakery for 2 weeks, and perhaps some chicken broth to help little Sarah regain her strength. It would mean another month in their tiny room above the feed store, another month of hoping their luck would turn. Margaret had been searching for work since they arrived in Carson City 6 weeks ago, but respectable positions for unmarried women without references were scarce as hen's teeth. The bell above the door chimed, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed a trim. His clothes marked him as a man of means despite their plain cut, quality wool and leather that had been well maintained. His eyes, a striking shade of gray, took in the scene with a quick intelligence that made Margaret suddenly self-conscious. "Afternoon, Mr. Young," Thomas said, his voice brightening. "I will be with you directly, sir. No hurry." The man called Mr. Young removed his hat, revealing more of that dark hair, and leaned against the wall with an easy grace. His gaze settled on Margaret, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Please proceed," Margaret said to Thomas, straightening her spine. She would not be ashamed of what necessity demanded. The apprentice positioned the scissors, but his hands shook badly enough that Margaret worried he might nick her ear. She closed her eyes, steeling herself for the loss, when a deep voice interrupted. "What are you paying her for the hair?" Margaret's eyes flew open. Mr. Young had stepped closer, addressing Thomas but looking at her. "I am not," Thomas stammered. "She is taking it to the wigmaker herself. I am just helping with the cutting." "The wigmaker on 3rd Street." When Thomas nodded, Mr. Young's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "He is a cheat. That hair is worth $30 at least, probably more in San Francisco." Margaret found her voice, though it came out sharper than she intended. "I appreciate your concern, sir, but $15 meets my current need. I cannot wait for a trip to San Francisco." Current need being, it was none of his business, but something in his direct gaze made evasion feel like cowardice. "My sister is ill. We need medicine and food." Mr. Young was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then he turned to Thomas. "Put those scissors away. The lady will not be cutting her hair today." "Now see here," Margaret began, indignation flaring hot in her chest. She had not asked for his interference, did not need some stranger making her choices for her, no matter how well-intentioned. "I will give you $60, he said calmly. "Not for your hair, for your time and skills if you have any useful ones. My foreman tells me I need to hire help for a business venture, and you look like someone willing to work hard." The amount staggered her. $60 was more money than she had seen in 6 months. It was also far too generous, which made her suspicious. "What sort of business venture?" "A bakery." Of all the answers she might have expected, that was not among them. She must have looked as surprised as she felt because the corner of his mouth twitched in something that was not quite a smile. I am a rancher, primarily. But I have been buying property in town, businesses that show promise or need better management. Morrison's bakery is failing because old George Morrison drinks more than he bakes these days. I bought the place last week, and I need someone to run it properly. Can you bake? Margaret's mind raced. She could bake. Her mother had taught her before the fever took both her parents 3 years ago, leaving Margaret and Sarah alone in the world. They had tried to maintain the small farm in California, but drought and debt had defeated them. The journey to Nevada had consumed the last of their resources. I can bake, she said carefully, but $60 is far too much for a job I have not yet proven I can do. Call it advance wages. Plus, the apartment above the bakery is empty. You and your sister can live there. No rent for the first 3 months. It was too much. No one offered such terms without expecting something in return. Margaret had learned that lesson the hard way more than once since her parents died. She lifted her chin. What else do you want from me? The question hung in the air between them, and she watched his expression shift from businesslike to something she could not quite read. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Nothing you are thinking, I assure you. I want someone honest to run my bakery, someone who will not steal from the till or water down the flour to increase profits. You walked in here ready to cut off your hair to feed your sister. That tells me you are honest and hardworking. Those qualities are worth $60 to me. Thomas watched the exchange with wide eyes, his head turning back and forth between them like he was following a tennis match. Margaret wanted to believe him. Lord help her. She wanted to believe that luck had finally turned in their favor, but trust was a luxury she could not afford. I will accept $20 and the apartment, and I will work to earn every cent. If my baking proves satisfactory after a month, we can discuss further wages. Now he did smile, and it transformed his whole face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. You drive a hard bargain. $25 the apartment, and you start tomorrow morning. The bakery needs a thorough cleaning before you can begin baking. $22. Deal. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but careful. Marcus Young. People call me Mark. Margaret Ellis. People call me Maggie. The nickname had always felt too casual for someone trying to be taken seriously in the world, but it slipped out naturally now. Well, Maggie Ellis, welcome to employment. Where is your sister now? In our room at the boarding house on 5th Street. She has a fever that comes and goes. The landlady has been kind enough to check on her while I am out, but I should return soon. Mark released her hand and reached into his pocket, withdrawing a leather wallet. He counted out bills and coins with quick efficiency. Here is your advance. Take this note to Dr. Brennan on 2nd Street. Tell him I sent you and to send me the bill for your sister's treatment. He is a good man and a better doctor than most. Maggie stared at the money in her hand, then at the hastily scrawled note he pressed into her other palm. You do not even know us. I know enough. He settled his hat back on his head. Thomas, I will return Thursday for that trim. Miss Ellis, I will meet you at the bakery at 6 tomorrow morning. We will go over the inventory, and I will show you where everything is stored. He was out the door before she could form another protest, the bell chiming cheerfully as he disappeared into the afternoon bustle of Carson Street. Maggie stood frozen, clutching money and note, her hair still flowing down her back. Well, I will be, Thomas breathed. Mr. Young is about the richest rancher in the territory, you know. Owns the Triple Y Ranch north of here. Folks say he came out here 10 years ago with nothing but a horse and a rifle, and now he has 3,000 head of cattle and land stretching to the foothills. Maggie barely heard him. She was too busy trying to understand what had just happened, trying to determine if she had just been saved or had walked into a different kind of trap. But Sarah needed medicine now, and the money in her hand was real enough. "Thank you for your help, Thomas," she managed, tucking the bills carefully into her pocket. "I should go." She walked quickly toward Dr. Brennan's office, the note clutched tight. The afternoon sun slanted across the buildings, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Carson City was growing fast, new construction competing with established businesses along every street. Freight wagons rattled past, and somewhere a piano played an off-key melody. The Sierra Nevada mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. Dr. Brennan turned out to be a white-haired gentleman with kind eyes behind wire spectacles. He read Mark's note, asked Maggie a few pertinent questions about Sarah's symptoms, and then packed a leather bag with supplies. "I will come with you now," he said. Fever that comes and goes could be several things, but best to examine her properly. The boarding house room was even more depressing, with the doctor's presence making it seem smaller. Sarah lay on the narrow bed, her dark blonde hair damp with sweat, her face flushed. At 13, she still had the gangly awkwardness of adolescence, all knobby joints and big eyes. Those eyes opened when Maggie touched her forehead. "Maggie, did you sell your hair?" "No, little bird. I found work instead. A good position. Now hush and let the doctor look at you." Dr. Brennan was thorough and gentle. He listened to Sarah's chest, looked at her throat, felt the glands in her neck. Finally, he sat back with a thoughtful expression. "It is not consumption, which is the good news. Appears to be influenza complicated by poor nutrition. Her lungs are clear, but she needs rest, good food, and this tonic 3 times a day." He produced a dark bottle from his bag. "Beef broth if you can manage it, eggs, fresh bread with butter." "I can manage it now," Maggie said, and explained about her new employment as she walked the doctor back downstairs. On the porch, Dr. Brennan paused. "Mark Young is a good man. Lost his own family young, I understand, though he does not speak of it. He is fair in his dealings. You could do worse for an employer." After the doctor left, Maggie climbed back upstairs and sat beside Sarah's bed. The afternoon was waning toward evening, and she had much to do before tomorrow morning. But for a moment, she just held her sister's hand and let herself feel the first stirrings of hope she had experienced in months. "We are going to be all right," she whispered. "I promise you, little bird, we are going to be all right." That night, Maggie hardly slept. She lay beside Sarah in the narrow bed, listening to her sister's breathing gradually ease as the medicine took effect, and thought about gray eyes and unlikely rescue. She thought about her mother's recipes, written in careful script in the book she had carried all the way from California. She thought about bread rising in the morning warmth and the smell of cinnamon and sugar. And she thought about Marcus Young, who had looked at her not with pity or with the calculating interest she had learned to fear, but with something else entirely. Respect, perhaps, or simple human decency. She would prove herself worthy of his faith, she decided. She would make that bakery the finest in Carson City, and she would repay every dollar of his advance. She would ask for nothing more than the chance to work and to keep her sister safe. It never occurred to her that some gifts were not meant to be repaid, only accepted. The bakery smelled of mice and neglect when Mark unlocked the door at 10 minutes before 6 the next morning. Maggie stood on the board sidewalk with Sarah beside her, bundled against the morning chill in their threadbare shawls. Mark took in Sarah's wan face and Maggie's protective stance with a single glance. "You must be Sarah," he said, crouching slightly to meet the girl's eyes. "I hear you have been under the weather." Sarah nodded shyly, pressing closer to her sister. Well, I imagine working in a bakery might be good for that. Nothing builds strength like kneading dough and sampling the goods. What do you think? A small smile touched Sarah's face. I think that sounds nice, sir. Call me Mark. Now, let us see what kind of mess old George left us. The interior was worse than Maggie had feared. Flour dust coated every surface, mouse droppings littered the corners, and the smell of sour milk emanated from somewhere in the back. The oven was caked with burnt residue, and the tables were sticky with grime. Mark surveyed it all with his hands on his hips. I may have understated the challenge slightly. I have faced worse, Maggie said, though she was not entirely certain that was true. But we will need cleaning supplies. Lots of them. Already arranged. He walked to the back door and opened it, revealing a wagon loaded with buckets, brushes, soap, lye, and fresh linens. I had my housekeeper, Rosa, put together what she thought you would need. She included some items for the apartment upstairs as well. The apartment proved to be in better condition than the bakery proper. It consisted of 3 rooms, a main living area with a small kitchen space, a bedroom, and a second smaller room that might serve as either storage or a second bedroom. The furniture was simple but sturdy, and the windows overlooked Carson Street, providing a view of the mountains beyond. It is perfect, Maggie breathed. It needs curtains and a woman's touch, Mark said, but the roof does not leak and the stove works well. I had Rosa stock the kitchen this morning. Nothing fancy, but enough to get you started. Maggie turned to face him. In the morning light streaming through the windows, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver just beginning to thread through his dark hair at the temples. He was perhaps 30, she guessed, maybe a few years older, old enough to have earned his success through hard work rather than luck. Why are you doing this? She asked. Please do not tell me again that it is simply good business sense. He met her gaze steadily. My mother died when I was 14. Left my father with 3 sons to raise. He did his best, but it was hard without her. We would have starved that first winter if not for a woman named Ruth Jensen who brought us food and asked nothing in return. When I asked her why, she said it was because someone had helped her once when she needed it most. He paused. Ruth passed some years back, but I never forgot what she taught me, that we are all responsible for each other, whether we like it or not. It was the most personal thing he had shared, and Maggie sensed the weight of memory behind his words. What happened to your father and brothers? Father died 5 years ago. Heart gave out. My younger brother runs cattle in Montana. The middle brother, he went back east to Philadelphia. Got himself an education and became a lawyer. A hint of pride entered Mark's voice. We write when we can. And you stayed here. I stayed here. Nevada got into my blood, I suppose. The land, the freedom of it, I like building something lasting. He gestured around the apartment. Like this. Businesses that serve the community, that give people work and purpose. Maggie felt something shift inside her, a wall she had not realized she was maintaining beginning to crack. I will make you proud of your investment. I believe you will. He smiled, and she noticed for the first time how it made his eyes crinkle at the corners. Now, shall we tackle that disaster downstairs? They worked through the morning and into the afternoon. Mark proved himself willing to scrub and haul and climb ladders, never treating the dirty work as beneath him. Sarah helped where she could, sweeping and washing dishes, her spirits lifting as the day progressed. Maggie found herself laughing at Mark's wry observations about George Morrison's housekeeping habits and the apparent mouse civilization that had taken up residence behind the flour bins. By evening, the bakery gleamed. The oven had been scraped clean and fired to burn off the residue. The floors shone with fresh scrubbing. The tables and counters were spotless, ready for tomorrow's baking. The glass display case at the front sparkled. Maggie stood in the center of it all, her sleeves rolled up and her hair escaping its pins, and felt a fierce satisfaction settle in her bones. "I will start the bread tonight," she said. "If I begin the starter now, I can have the first loaves ready by morning." Mark checked his pocket watch. "It is nearly 7. You have been working for 13 hours. Bread waits for no one. The dough needs time to rise." "Then I will stay and help. You have already done more than enough. Maggie." He said her name quietly, and she stopped her protest. "Let me help, please." There was something in his voice, a loneliness perhaps, or a need to be useful that she recognized because she felt it herself. So she nodded, and together they measured flour and salt and yeast, their hands working in companionable silence as Sarah dozed in a chair by the stove. "My mother made bread every Saturday," Mark said, working the dough with practiced ease. "She said there was no more honest work than feeding people, that breaking bread together was what made us human." Maggie added water to her mixture, feeling it come together under her hands. "My mother said something similar. She told me that every loaf was a prayer, a hope for better days." "Were your parents religious?" "Not especially, but they believed in hard work and kindness. They believed in making something beautiful out of whatever you had." She shaped her dough into a ball and set it in a greased bowl. "They would have liked you, I think." The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. Mark looked up from his work, flour dusting his forearms, and their eyes met across the table. "I wish I could have known them," he said simply. They finished the preparations in silence, covering the dough and setting it near the warm stove to rise overnight. Outside, Carson City settled into its evening rhythms. Saloons came alive with music and laughter. Restaurants served their dinner crowds. Somewhere a dog barked, and wagon wheels clattered over the rutted streets. Mark helped carry sleeping Sarah upstairs, laying her gently on the bed in the smaller room. Maggie tucked a quilt around her sister, brushing hair from her flushed forehead. "The fever is less tonight," Mark observed quietly from the doorway. "Yes, the medicine is helping." Maggie joined him in the main room, suddenly aware of how intimate this felt, the two of them alone in her new home. "Thank you for today, for everything." "I should thank you. I have not had this much fun in a long time." He seemed to realize how that sounded and clarified. "Not fun exactly. Purpose, maybe. It felt good to build something with my own hands again. Does being a successful rancher not provide that?" "It does, but differently. I have good men who handle most of the day-to-day work. I deal with accounts and contracts and politics." He grimaced slightly. "I miss the simplicity of physical labor sometimes, the immediate satisfaction of seeing results." Maggie understood that. For months she had felt adrift, unable to gain purchase on anything solid. Today, for the first time since leaving California, she had felt useful, capable, like herself again. "Will you come check on us tomorrow?" she asked, "to see how the first day of baking goes?" "I will come by in the afternoon." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Maggie, I know this all happened very fast. If you have concerns or questions about anything, you can speak plainly with me. I want you to feel safe here." The careful way he said it told her he understood some of what she had been through, the wariness that came from having to guard yourself against the world. "I believe you," she said, and meant it. After he left, Maggie stood by the window and watched him walk down the street to where his horse was tied. He moved with an easy confidence, nodding to people he passed, pausing to help an older woman navigate the steps of the general store. When he mounted his horse, he looked up, perhaps sensing her gaze, and raised a hand in farewell. She waved back, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. The first loaves came out of the oven at 5:30 the next morning, their crusts golden brown and crackling, the smell filling the bakery with warmth and promise. Maggie stood back and admired them with fierce pride. She had done this. She had created something good. By 6, she had 24 loaves cooling on racks, and by 7, when she opened the doors, she had added cinnamon rolls, biscuits, and a batch of sugar cookies that Sarah had helped decorate with careful concentration. The first customer was a miner still dusty from the night shift, who bought 2 loaves and a half-dozen cookies. "Smells better than anything George ever made," he declared. Word spread quickly. By mid-morning, Maggie had a steady stream of customers, and by noon, her initial stock was nearly depleted. She worked in a kind of joyous frenzy, taking orders, making change, chatting with customers while mentally calculating what she would need for tomorrow. Sarah proved herself useful at the counter, her shy smile winning over even the gruffest patrons. Maggie watched her sister bloom under the attention and purpose, color returning to her cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. Mark arrived at 3, as promised. The bakery was empty at the moment, the lunch rush over, and the dinner crowd not yet arrived. He surveyed the nearly empty shelves and the satisfied expression on Maggie's face. "I take it the day went well. I sold everything but 4 loaves, which I am saving for us and for you, if you will accept them." She wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly nervous. Was the amount reasonable? "I used the prices you had written down, but if they were wrong, the prices were fine." Better than fine, from the looks of things. He pulled out a small notebook. "I had a thought last night. What if we added a few specialty items, things people cannot get anywhere else in Carson City? Rosa makes these almond pastries from her mother's recipe in Mexico. I thought perhaps she could teach you, and you could offer them on weekends. And there is a demand for wedding cakes that no one is currently meeting well." Maggie's mind immediately began working through possibilities. "I could do wedding cakes and specialty pastries, maybe pies as well. My mother's apple pie won 2nd place at the county fair 3 years running. Why not first? Because she refused to reveal her secret ingredient to the judges, and they held it against her." Maggie grinned at the memory. She said some things should remain mysteries. "A woman after my own heart." Mark's expression was warm. "What was the secret ingredient? A mystery," he laughed, a genuine sound that made something flutter in Maggie's stomach. "Fair enough, keep your secrets, as long as you use them in my bakery." Their eyes held for a moment longer than strictly necessary. Sarah cleared her throat from where she was sweeping the floor, a knowing look on her young face that made Maggie blush. "I should prepare for the evening customers," Maggie said quickly. "People stopping by after work." "Of course." "I will leave you to it." Mark tipped his hat. "Same time tomorrow." "That is not necessary. I know you have your own work." "Same time tomorrow," he repeated firmly. "I want to make sure everything is running smoothly." After he left, Sarah came to stand beside Maggie at the window. "He likes you." "He is my employer, nothing more. He looks at you like Papa used to look at Mama, when he thought she was not watching." Maggie pulled her sister close, not trusting herself to respond. Because Sarah was right, and Maggie had noticed it too, the way Mark's gaze lingered. The way he found excuses to touch her hand when passing her something. The way his whole face softened when he smiled at her. And if she was being honest with herself, the way she felt her pulse quicken when she heard his footsteps on the stairs. The way she caught herself watching for him out the window. The way she had started taking more care with her appearance in the mornings, pinning her hair more carefully, and choosing her least worn dress. It was dangerous to feel these things. She had responsibilities, a sister to care for, a new position to maintain. Romance was a luxury she could not afford, especially with her employer. The power imbalance alone made it complicated, But her heart, it seemed, had not received that message. The days fell into a rhythm. Maggie rose before dawn to start the bread. Sarah helped more each day as her health improved, learning to measure ingredients and knead dough. The bakery thrived, becoming a gathering place for miners stopping in before their shifts, families picking up bread for dinner, ladies meeting for coffee and gossip over fresh pastries. Mark came by every afternoon, always finding some business reason for his visit, but staying longer than strictly necessary. He helped Sarah with her arithmetic, teaching her to calculate change and keep simple accounts. He fixed a broken hinge on the front door. He brought news from around town and made Maggie laugh with his dry observations about local politics. Rosa, Mark's housekeeper, visited one Wednesday and spent the afternoon teaching Maggie to make the almond pastries, which Rosa called polverons. She was a round woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper wit. "He is different around you," Rosa observed as they worked. "Lighter, somehow. He has been alone too long, that one, too serious all the time." "We are just employer and employee," Maggie protested weakly. Rosa made a skeptical sound. "I have worked for Mr. Mark for 8 years. Never once has he checked on his other businesses every single day. The mercantile, the freight company, the cattle operations, he visits them once a week at most. But this bakery, every day." She patted Maggie's hand. "You are good for him. Do not fight it so hard." But Maggie could not help being cautious. Good things in her life had a way of disappearing. Her parents, her home, her security. She had learned not to count on happiness lasting. Then came the afternoon 3 weeks after the bakery opened when everything changed. Maggie was arranging fresh loaves in the window display when raised voices in the street made her look up. A man was shouting, his words slurred with drink. George Morrison, the former owner, weaving unsteadily on the board sidewalk. "That is my bakery," he yelled, pointing at the building. "Mine." He had no right to take it. A small crowd gathered, the way crowds do when there is a hint of drama. Maggie set down the bread and moved to the door, uncertain whether to engage or to stay inside. Mark appeared from the direction of the bank, his expression hardening when he saw Morrison. He positioned himself between the drunk man and the bakery entrance. "You sold me the bakery legally, George. You signed the papers. The money is in your account. You cheated me. Took advantage." Morrison swayed, his face red and furious. "I want it back. You can barely stand. Go home and sleep it off. Do not tell me what to do on my own property. It is not your property anymore." Mark's voice remained calm but firm. "You lost the right to call it yours when you drank away the profits and let the place fall apart. Now move along before I get the sheriff." Morrison's hand went to his hip, and Maggie's heart seized when she saw the gun holstered there. The crowd murmured nervously, people stepping back. "George." Mark's voice changed, becoming harder. "Do not do something you cannot take back. Give me my bakery." Everything happened very fast. Morrison drew his gun, or tried to, his drunk fingers fumbling. Mark moved forward to restrain him. The gun discharged with a crack that made Maggie's ears ring. For a horrible moment, she thought Mark had been shot. Then she realized the bullet had gone into the wooden sidewalk at their feet. Mark had Morrison's wrist in a crushing grip, forcing the gun away and down. Sheriff Coleman arrived at a run, 2 deputies behind him. They wrestled Morrison to the ground and disarmed him. The whole incident was over in less than 2 minutes, but Maggie found she could not stop shaking. Mark looked up and saw her in the doorway, her face bloodless. He said something to the sheriff, then crossed to her quickly. "Are you all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Where is Sarah?" "Upstairs. I sent her up before coming to the door." "Thank God for that small mercy." Mark's hand settled on her shoulders, steadying her. "It is over." George will sleep it off in a cell, and by tomorrow he will be apologetic and embarrassed. He is not a bad man, just a drunk and desperate one. He could have killed you, but he did not." His thumb brushed her collarbone through her dress, a gesture that might have been unconscious but felt deliberate. "I am fine. You are fine. Everyone is safe." The crowd was dispersing, excitement over. Someone had already covered the bullet hole in the sidewalk with a board. Carson City had seen worse and would see worse again. This was barely worth discussing over dinner. But Maggie could not shake the image of that gun, the casual violence of it. The reminder that safety was always temporary, that loss could come in a single moment. "Come inside," she heard herself say. "Please, just for a few minutes." They sat in the bakery's back room, away from curious eyes. Maggie poured coffee with shaking hands. Mark took the cup and set it aside, then took her hands in his. "Talk to me. I thought you were going to die." The words came out in a rush. Right there in the street, and it would have been because of me, because of this bakery. "That is not how it works. George's problems are his own making, not yours. But if I had not taken this position, then you would be somewhere else, struggling to feed your sister. And George would still be a drunk losing his business, and I would be dealing with him anyway." Mark squeezed her hands gently. "You did not cause this, Maggie. You are not responsible for other people's choices." She wanted to believe him, but guilt was a hard habit to break. "I lost everyone," she whispered. "My parents, my home, everything I knew. And when we came here, I thought maybe we could start fresh, but I am so afraid all the time. Afraid that I will lose Sarah too. Afraid that this good thing you have given us will disappear. Afraid to trust that anything good can last. I understand that fear." Mark's voice was low, his eyes intense on hers. "After my mother died, I spent years waiting for the next disaster. Expecting my father to drop dead or my brothers to get hurt or the ranch to fail. It paralyzed me for a long time. What changed? I met someone who taught me that fear is just another kind of cage. That you can choose to live despite being afraid, or you can let the fear make all your choices for you." He paused. "She was a remarkable woman. I was too young and stupid to recognize what I had, and I lost her to my own cowardice." There was a story there, Maggie sensed. An old hurt not fully healed. "What happened?" "I let her marry someone else because I was afraid I could not provide for her. By the time I had money and land and security, she had 3 children and a husband who loved her. She was happy, which was what mattered. But I learned something important from that mistake." "What?" "That regret tastes worse than any failure. That sometimes you have to take the risk, even when you are terrified, because the alternative is a half-lived life." His gray eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I am taking a risk right now saying this, but I would regret it more if I stayed silent." Maggie's heart hammered against her ribs. "Mark, I know I am your employer. I know the power imbalance makes this complicated. But Maggie, these past 3 weeks, coming here every day, watching you build something beautiful, seeing you with your sister, talking with you about everything and nothing. You have become the best part of my days. And if there is any chance you might feel even a fraction of what I am feeling, I need to know." She should be cautious. She should maintain professional distance. She should protect herself and Sarah from any more potential loss, but she was so tired of being afraid. And the truth was, she had fallen a little bit in love with Marcus Young the moment he stopped her from cutting her hair, and she had been falling deeper every day since. "I feel it too," she said quietly. "I try not to, but I do." The smile that transformed his face was worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. "Then maybe we can figure this out together. Slowly if you need slow. Carefully because of Sarah and the business and everything else. But together." Together, she echoed, and when he leaned forward and kissed her forehead, she closed her eyes and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, good things could last. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her young face creased with worry. I heard shouting and a loud bang. Is everyone all right? Everyone is fine, little bird. Maggie stood and pulled her sister into a hug. Just some excitement that is over now. Sarah looked between them, clearly sensing something had changed beyond the incident in the street. Are you sure? Very sure, Mark said, his eyes never leaving Maggie's face. In fact, I think things just got considerably better. The autumn days grew shorter and cooler. The bakery's reputation spread beyond Carson City, bringing customers from Virginia City and even as far as Reno. Maggie hired 2 girls to help with the counter and cleaning, giving her more time to focus on the baking itself. Mark courted her properly, or as properly as circumstances allowed. He brought her wildflowers from the high meadows on his ranch. He took her and Sarah on a picnic to Lake Tahoe, where the water was so blue it hurt to look at. He taught Maggie to ride a horse, laughing when she gripped the saddle horn with white knuckles but never making her feel foolish. They were careful about appearances, aware that gossip could harm both the bakery and Mark's other business interests. But Carson City was a practical place, and people generally approved of the match. A hard-working young woman and a successful rancher who treated her with respect seemed like good sense rather than scandal. On a crisp evening in early November, Mark invited Maggie and Sarah to dinner at the ranch. Rosa had outdone herself, preparing a feast of roasted chicken, vegetables from the ranch garden, and a pie made with Maggie's secret recipe that made Mark close his eyes in appreciation. After dinner, while Sarah helped Rosa in the kitchen despite Rosa's protests, Mark led Maggie onto the wide porch that wrapped around the ranch house. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. I built this house 5 years ago, Mark said, leaning against the railing. Designed it myself, made it bigger than I needed because I kept thinking someday I would have a family to fill it. Maggie joined him at the railing, her shoulder brushing his. It is a beautiful home. It has been lonely. He turned to face her, his expression serious. Maggie, I know we have only known each other for 2 months. By most standards, that is not nearly long enough to make important decisions, but I also feel like I have known you much longer. Like I was waiting for you without realizing it. Her heart began to race. Mark, let me finish before I lose my courage. He took her hands. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you make me laugh. I love how you are with Sarah, how fiercely you protect the people you care about. I love that you drive a hard bargain and that you keep your mother's pie recipe secret and that you sing when you think no one is listening. You have heard that. The walls between the bakery and the street are not as thick as you think. His smile was gentle. I want to build a life with you, Maggie. I want to wake up to you every morning and come home to you every night. I want to give Sarah the stable home she deserves and maybe, if you are willing, have children of our own someday. I want everything with you. Tears pricked at Maggie's eyes. I want that too, so much. Then marry me. He reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the last light of sunset. It is not fancy, it is perfect. She was crying now, she realized, tears of joy rather than sorrow for once. Yes, yes, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. Then he cupped her face and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Maggie kissed him back, pouring all her hope and love and gratitude into that moment. Behind them, Sarah squealed with delight, and Rosa laughed. They broke apart to find their small audience beaming at them from the doorway. About time. Rosa declared. "I was beginning to think you would both be too stubborn to admit what everyone could see." Sarah ran to them, throwing her arms around both Maggie and Mark. "Does this mean we get to stay?" "Forever, forever," Mark confirmed, including Sarah in their embrace. "If that is all right with you." "It is more than all right, it is perfect." Sarah looked up at her sister. "Mama and Papa would be so happy for you." "They would," Maggie agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "They would love Mark just like we do." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church on King Street, with half of Carson City in attendance. Maggie wore a dress of cream silk that Rosa and Sarah had helped her sew, with lace at the collar and sleeves. Mark wore a new suit that made him look even more handsome than usual, though he kept tugging at the collar nervously until Maggie reached over and stilled his hand. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Judge Harrison, a friend of Mark's, performed the service. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Mark kissed Maggie with such tenderness that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. The reception was held at the bakery, which Maggie had insisted on keeping even after the wedding. "It is mine," she told Mark. "My accomplishment. I do not want to give it up." "I would never ask you to," he assured her. "It will always be yours to run as you see fit." So they celebrated in the bakery with bread and pastries and the wedding cake Maggie had spent 2 days creating. It was 3 tiers of white cake with buttercream frosting, decorated with sugar flowers that Sarah had painstakingly crafted under Maggie's guidance. Dr. Brennan gave a rambling toast about the healing power of love. Rosa cried and blessed them in Spanish. Sarah made a short speech about how she had known from the first day that Mark and Maggie belonged together, which made everyone laugh. And when the last guest had left and Sarah had been tucked into bed at Rosa's house for the night, Mark took Maggie's hand and led her out to the wagon for the ride back to the ranch. The house glowed with lamplight, welcoming them home. Mark carried Maggie over the threshold despite her laughing protests that it was unnecessary. In the bedroom he had prepared for them, a fire crackled in the hearth, and someone, probably Rosa, had scattered rose petals across the quilt. "Hello, wife," Mark said softly, setting her down. "Hello, husband." The words felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. They undressed each other slowly, learning the landscape of each other's bodies with hands and lips and whispered endearments. When Mark finally made love to her, Maggie felt as though she were being remade, transformed from someone who had survived into someone who was truly alive. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, she traced idle patterns on his skin and marveled at how completely her life had changed in just 3 months. "What are you thinking?" Mark asked, his fingers combing through her unbound hair. "That I almost cut this off to buy bread. And now here I am, married to the man who bought the bakery instead. Best business decision I ever made." She propped herself up to look at him. "Was it really a business decision? At first, maybe. I told myself I was just helping someone who needed it, making a smart investment. But the truth," he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, "the truth is I looked at you standing there ready to sacrifice something precious to care for your sister, and I fell a little bit in love right then. Everything after was just me trying to figure out how to keep you in my life. You could have just asked me to dinner. Could I? You looked like you wanted to hit me just for interfering with your hair-cutting plans. I thought subtlety was the wiser approach." Maggie laughed and kissed him. "I suppose it worked out well enough." "Well enough," he agreed, pulling her closer. "Though I maintain you are a terrible negotiator, I would have gone up to $50 if you had pushed harder. I will remember that for next time I negotiate with you. Please do not. I am a weak man where you are concerned. You could probably get me to buy you half the territory." "I only want this," Maggie said seriously. You, me, Sarah, this life we are building. Everything else is just details. Mark kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Then you already have everything I can give you. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret this. And as Mark made love to her again, slower this time, the fire burning low and the night stretching vast and welcoming around them, Maggie thought about all the paths that had led her here. The grief and the struggle, the fear and the determination, the moment of desperation in a barber shop that had somehow transformed into this improbable joy. She had been ready to cut her hair to buy bread, to sacrifice a piece of herself just to survive another day. Instead, she had found a man who bought her the bakery and gave her both the bread and her dignity, who gave her love and respect and partnership, who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. Winter settled over Carson City, bringing snow to the mountains and frost to the valley. Maggie continued running the bakery with Sarah's help, though she adjusted her hours now that she had a household to manage as well. Mark's ranch kept him busy, but he still found time to stop by the bakery most afternoons, stealing kisses in the back room and making Sarah roll her eyes at their affection. Christmas came, and they celebrated with a feast at the ranch. Rosa's family joined them, along with several of Mark's ranch hands who had nowhere else to go. The house rang with laughter and music, and Maggie played hostess with a grace that surprised her. "You are a natural at this," Rosa observed, watching Maggie coordinate serving dishes and make sure everyone had enough to eat. "I am terrified I will do something wrong." "Impossible. You care about people and they feel it. That is all hospitality really is." On Christmas morning, Mark gave Maggie a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For your recipes," he explained. "And maybe for other things too. Thoughts, memories, whatever you want to preserve." Maggie gave him a set of silver cufflinks she had saved for months to buy, engraved with his initials. "For business meetings, so everyone knows what a successful, distinguished gentleman you are. I am a cattle rancher. We do not have many business meetings that require cufflinks. Then you can wear them to church and scandalize the congregation with your fancy Eastern ways." He laughed and pulled her into his lap, not caring that half a dozen people were watching. "How did I survive before you? Poorly, from what Rosa tells me." "Rosa exaggerates." "Rosa speaks only truth," Rosa called from the kitchen, making everyone laugh. Sarah's gift to both of them was a drawing she had made in secret, working on it for weeks. It showed the three of them standing in front of the bakery, holding hands, the ranch house visible in the background. She had captured something essential in the simple pencil lines, the sense of connection and belonging that had come to define their small family. Maggie cried when she saw it, and Mark's voice was suspiciously rough when he thanked Sarah and promised to frame it and hang it in the place of honor in the house. "We are a family now," Sarah said simply. "I wanted to draw that." "We are," Mark agreed, "and nothing will ever change that." Spring brought new life to the ranch. Calves were born, and Mark took Maggie and Sarah to see them, explaining the intricacies of cattle ranching with a passion that made his love for the work evident. Maggie tried to understand the difference between Herefords and Longhorns, between grazing rotations and breeding lines, and mostly just enjoyed watching him in his element. She also discovered she was pregnant. The realization came one morning in late April when the smell of baking bread, which had always been her favorite scent, suddenly made her nauseous. Dr. Brennan confirmed it that afternoon, his eyes twinkling behind his spectacles. "Perfectly healthy, as far as I can tell. You should expect the baby in late November or early December." Maggie walked back to the bakery in a daze. A baby. She was going to have Mark's baby, The joy was immediate and overwhelming, but so was the fear. What if something went wrong? What if she was not a good mother? What if she stopped herself? This was exactly what Mark had warned her about, letting fear make her choices. She placed a hand over her still flat stomach and made a promise to the life growing there. "I will be brave for you," she whispered. "I will love you fiercely and raise you well and teach you that good things can last, that they do last, when you are willing to fight for them." That evening, she waited until after dinner when Sarah had gone upstairs to practice her letters. Then she took Mark's hand and led him out to the porch where he had proposed, where the mountains were turning purple in the fading light. "I have something to tell you." His expression shifted to concern. "Is something wrong? Are you feeling all right? You barely ate dinner." "I am pregnant." For a moment he just stared at her. Then a smile broke across his face like sunrise, brilliant and transformative. "Truly, Dr. Brennan confirmed it today. The baby should come in late fall." Mark swept her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, his hands framed her face with infinite gentleness. "A baby, our baby." His voice was thick with emotion. "Maggie, you have given me so much already, and now this. I do not have words." "Then do not use words." She kissed him, pouring all her love and hope and cautious joy into it. "Just promise me you will be there, through all of it." "I promise. Every single moment. I will be there when you are sick in the mornings and when your back aches and when your feet swell. I will be there for the birth if you want me and for every day after. You will never do this alone." "We will never be alone again," Maggie corrected. "Any of us." That night, lying in bed with Mark's hand resting protectively over her stomach, Maggie felt something settle in her soul. A sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. She had spent so long in survival mode, fighting just to make it through each day. But now she was building something that would outlast her. A family, a legacy, a love that would ripple forward through time. The pregnancy was harder than she expected. The morning sickness lasted well into her 4th month, making baking a challenge. Her body ached in ways she had not anticipated. But Mark kept his promise, holding her hair when she was sick, rubbing her swollen feet, taking over more of the bakery management when she needed rest. Sarah was thrilled at the prospect of being an aunt, already planning all the things she would teach the baby. "I will show them how to bake," she announced, "and how to raid, and how to ride horses, and everything." "The baby will be lucky to have you," Maggie assured her. Summer heat made everything more difficult. Maggie could no longer stand for long hours in front of the hot ovens, so she trained her 2 employees to handle more of the actual baking while she focused on recipes and special orders. The bakery continued to thrive, and Maggie felt a fierce pride that she had built something that could survive even when she stepped back. In September, Mark surprised her by having workmen convert one of the ranch house bedrooms into a nursery. He had ordered a beautiful carved cradle from a craftsman in Sacramento and had Rosa sew tiny gowns and blankets. "You did all this without telling me." Maggie stood in the doorway, one hand on her rounded belly, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted it to be perfect before you saw it." Mark looked uncertain. "Do you like it? We can change anything you want. It is absolutely perfect." She walked in slowly, running her hand over the smooth wood of the cradle, touching the soft blankets, imagining their child sleeping here safe and warm. "I cannot believe this is real sometimes. That we are really doing this. We are really doing this." Mark came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her as best he could with her belly in the way. "In a few months there will be a baby in that cradle, our baby. And we will be exhausted and terrified and happier than we ever imagined possible. You make it sound easy. It will not be easy, but we will do it together, just like everything else." The first contractions came on a cold December evening, 3 weeks earlier than Dr. Brennan had predicted. Maggie was helping Sarah with her arithmetic when a sharp pain made her gasp and grip the table. "Maggie." Sarah's eyes went wide with alarm. "It is all right. I think it is time." Another contraction, stronger this time. "Go get Mark. Tell him to send someone for Dr. Brennan." The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Rosa took charge with calm efficiency, boiling water and preparing the bedroom. Mark stayed by Maggie's side, letting her grip his hand hard enough to leave marks, murmuring encouragement when she was sure she could not continue. "You can do this," he told her, his voice steady even though his face was pale. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do anything. I am going to break your hand. Break both of them if you need to. I do not care." Dr. Brennan arrived and examined her. "Everything looks good. The baby is positioned well. It should not be too much longer now." "Should not be." Maggie wanted to hit him. "How much longer?" "Babies come on their own schedule, my dear, but I would guess another hour or two." It was closer to 3 hours, 3 hours of the hardest work Maggie had ever done. But finally, as the clock struck midnight, their son came into the world with a lusty cry that made Maggie laugh through her tears. "A boy," Dr. Brennan announced, placing the squalling infant on Maggie's chest. "Strong and healthy." Maggie looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and waving fists, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. Mark leaned over them both, his expression awed. "He is perfect," Mark whispered. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Maggie stroked the baby's soft cheek, marveling at the miracle of him. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at this new life they had created, Maggie knew what felt right. "Matthew," she said. "Matthew Young, after your mother's maiden name." Mark's eyes went bright with tears. "You remembered that?" "Of course I remembered. You told me she was the heart of your family. I thought maybe our son could carry a piece of her with him." Mark kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Matthew Young, I love it, I love you, I love him. I love all of this so much I can hardly breathe." "Then do not breathe. Just be here with us in this moment." Sarah was allowed in to meet her nephew, her young face solemn with the weight of the occasion. She touched Matthew's tiny hand with one careful finger, and he immediately gripped it, making her gasp with delight. "He is so small and perfect." She looked up at Maggie. "You did such a good job." "We all did," Maggie said. "We are all going to take care of him together." Rosa came in with warm broth and bread, insisting Maggie eat to regain her strength. The ranch hands came by one at a time to offer congratulations, rough men made gentle by the sight of the new baby. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Maggie nursed Matthew for the first time while Mark dozed in the chair beside the bed, and Sarah slept curled at her feet. The house was quiet except for the baby's small sounds and the crackle of the fire Rosa had built. This was what she had been fighting for, Maggie realized. Not just survival, but this. Family and love and the possibility of joy. The journey from that desperate moment in the barber shop to this peaceful morning had been shorter in months than it felt in experience. She had traveled from the edge of giving up to the center of a life she had not dared imagine. And it had all begun because one man had seen her about to make a sacrifice and had offered her a different choice. Not charity, which would have wounded her pride, but an opportunity to prove herself. Mark had given her back her dignity along with hope, and she had fallen in love with him for it. Matthew finished nursing and fell asleep against her chest, his tiny weight warm and perfect. Maggie closed her eyes and let herself feel the full weight of her gratitude and her love. She had everything she needed right here in this room. The years unfolded with the steady rhythm of ranch life and the changing seasons. Matthew grew from infant to toddler to a bright, curious boy who followed his father around the ranch and helped his mother in the bakery, his small hands earnest as he tried to knead bread. Sarah blossomed into a beautiful young woman, taking on more responsibility in both the bakery and the household. She caught the eye of the blacksmith's son, a serious young man named Thomas Fletcher who courted her properly and asked Mark for permission to marry her when she turned 18. The wedding was held at the ranch in the spring of 1881, with Sarah radiant in a dress of pale blue silk. Matthew, now 5 years old, served as ring-bearer with solemn concentration. Maggie cried during the ceremony, remembering the scared girl Sarah had been when they arrived in Carson City, so different from this confident young woman pledging her life to a good man. "They grow up so fast," Mark murmured, his arm around Maggie's waist. "Too fast." But it was a good thing, this growing and changing. Sarah would be happy with Thomas, would build her own life here in Carson City. She would always be part of their family, but would have a family of her own too. The bakery continued to prosper, becoming something of an institution in Carson City. Maggie had hired a full-time manager, a competent widow named Helen Morrison, no relation to George, who ran the day-to-day operations while Maggie focused on recipe development and special orders. The wedding cakes in particular became legendary, with orders coming from as far as Sacramento. Mark expanded his ranching operations, buying more land and diversifying into horses as well as cattle. He was elected to the territorial legislature for a term, though he did not particularly enjoy the politics of it. What he loved was the land, the work of building something lasting. In the summer of 1882, Maggie discovered she was pregnant again. She was 32 now, and this pregnancy felt different from the first, harder on her body. But when their daughter was born that December, tiny and perfect with Mark's gray eyes and Maggie's chestnut hair, every moment of discomfort was forgotten. They named her Rose after Mark's mother, and she proved to be a force of nature from her first breath. Where Matthew was cautious and thoughtful, Rose was bold and fearless. By age 2, she was climbing everything in sight and giving her parents heart attacks on a regular basis. "She is going to be the death of me," Mark said one afternoon, watching Rose climb onto the porch railing despite having been told a dozen times not to. "She is your daughter," Maggie pointed out. "You told me you spent half your childhood getting into trouble. That is different." "How?" "Because I was a boy. Boys are expected to get into trouble. Girls are supposed to be delicate and well-behaved." Maggie gave him a look. "Did you really just say that to me? The woman who walked into a barber shop ready to cut off her hair to feed her sister." Mark had the grace to look sheepish. "Point taken. Our daughter can climb whatever she wants, I suppose. I will just start praying more." Rose climbed down from the railing and ran to her father, throwing her arms around his legs. "Papa, can we go see the horses?" "May we?" Mark corrected automatically, but he was already scooping her up. "And yes, we may, but you have to promise to stay outside the corral." "I promise." Rose's promises were enthusiastic if not always reliable. Maggie watched them go, Mark carrying Rose on his shoulders while she chattered about everything and nothing. Matthew appeared from the direction of the barn, his hands dirty from helping with the horses. At 8 years old, he was already showing signs of becoming a skilled horseman. "Mama, can I have some bread and jam?" he asked. "May I?" Maggie corrected, echoing Mark. "And yes, you may. Wash your hands first." These were the moments that made up a life, she thought. Not the grand gestures or dramatic events, but the everyday sweetness of children asking for bread and jam, of husbands carrying daughters, of love expressed in 1,000 small ways. The bakery had been where it started, but this was what it had all been for. In 1885, when Matthew was 10 and Rose was 3, Carson City celebrated its 25th anniversary of being Nevada's capital. The town organized a grand celebration, with speeches and a parade and a fair in the main square. Maggie was asked to provide baked goods for the celebration, and she threw herself into the work with enthusiasm. For 2 weeks, her bakery produced an astonishing array of bread, pastries, cakes, and cookies. The ranch house kitchen was also pressed into service, with Rosa and Maggie working side by side to meet the demand. On the day of the celebration, Maggie stood in the town square surrounded by tables laden with her baked goods, watching people line up to buy them. Mark stood beside her with Rose on his shoulders and Matthew pressed against his side, all of them dressed in their finest clothes. "Look at what you built," Mark said quietly. "From that first desperate day to this, look at what you created." "We created," Maggie corrected. "None of this would have been possible without you. I just bought a building. You made it into something that matters to this community." "You bought me hope," Maggie said, turning to face him. "You bought me a chance to prove myself. That was worth more than any building." Governor Adams gave a speech about Nevada's progress and bright future. The mayor thanked various citizens for their contributions to Carson City's growth, including Mark for his business investments and Maggie for making the finest baked goods in the territory. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the square, music started playing. Mark held out his hand to Maggie. "Dance with me. I am not much of a dancer." "Neither am I. We will figure it out together like everything else." So they danced in the town square while their children watched and laughed, while their neighbors celebrated around them, while the mountains stood eternal in the distance. Maggie rested her head against Mark's chest and listened to his steady heartbeat and thought about all the paths that had led to this moment. She had been 24 years old and desperate, standing in a barber shop ready to cut her hair to buy bread. She had been trying to survive, not daring to imagine anything beyond the next meal the next day. And then a cowboy had walked in and bought her the bakery and given her both the bread and her hair and, eventually, his heart. "What are you thinking?" Mark asked, his breath warm against her temple. "That I am grateful, that I love you, that I am glad I did not cut my hair that day. I am glad, too." His arms tightened around her. "Though I would have loved you even with short hair." "Would you?" "I would have loved you no matter what. From the moment I saw you standing there, so fierce and brave and determined, I was lost. Everything after was just me trying to catch up to what my heart already knew." Maggie lifted her face to kiss him, not caring that half the town could see. "You caught up eventually, did I? Well enough." He laughed and spun her around, making her dizzy and happy. Rose demanded to dance too, so Mark swept her up and waltzed with his daughter while Matthew rolled his eyes but smiled. Maggie stood back and watched her family, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not the absence of struggle or fear, but the presence of love strong enough to weather whatever came. Not a life without challenges, but people who faced those challenges together. The music played on, and the stars came out over Nevada, and Maggie Ellis Young danced with her husband and children in the town square of Carson City, exactly where she belonged. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Matthew grew tall and serious, graduating from the local school at the top of his class. He talked about going to university in California, maybe studying agriculture or business. Mark encouraged him, proud of his son's ambition, even as he hoped Matthew might eventually return to help run the ranch. Rose proved to be a natural with horses, fearless and intuitive. By the time she was 7, she could ride better than most of the ranch hands. She also showed an unexpected talent for baking, helping Maggie in the kitchens with a concentration unusual in someone so young. "She has your gift," Mark observed one afternoon, watching Rose carefully pipe icing onto a birthday cake. "The way you did at her age, I imagine." "My mother would have loved her," Maggie said softly. "Both of them." Sarah had 2 children now, a daughter named Margaret after her sister and a son called Thomas after his father. She and her husband had bought the mercantile on Carson Street, running it successfully while raising their family. The cousins played together often, the ranch and the town houses serving as gathering places for the extended family. On Sundays, they all met for dinner, either at the ranch or at Sarah's house. These gatherings were loud and chaotic and perfect, filled with children's laughter and adult conversation and the simple pleasure of being together. "This is what I dreamed of," Mark told Maggie one Sunday evening after everyone had left. They sat on the porch watching the sunset, his arm around her shoulders. Not the money or the land or the success. This, family and love and continuity. "You have built something remarkable," Maggie said, "not just the ranch or the businesses, but this whole life, this community of people who care about each other. We built it. Together." In 1890, Matthew left for university in San Francisco, and Maggie cried for a week despite trying to be brave. He was 18 now, a man by any measure, but he would always be her baby boy. Mark was more stoic about it, but she caught him standing in Matthew's empty room more than once, his expression distant. "He will come back," Maggie assured him. "Will he? Why would he when he has the whole world in front of him? Because his roots are here. Because his family is here. Because some things matter more than opportunity." She took Mark's hand. "You came back to Nevada after you could have gone anywhere. Matthew has that same loyalty." She was right. Matthew returned 2 years later with a degree in agricultural science and ideas about improving ranch management and crop rotation. He threw himself into working alongside his father, bringing new knowledge to old practices. Mark watched his son with undisguised pride. "He is going to do things I never imagined," he told Maggie. "Take everything I built and make it better, bigger." "That is what we want for our children, is it not? To surpass us, in theory. In practice, it makes me feel old," Maggie laughed. "You are 47, not ancient." "I feel ancient some days." "Then it is good I am here to keep you young." Rose, at 10, announced she wanted to learn to break horses. Mark initially refused, saying it was too dangerous, but Rose wore him down with a combination of logical arguments and sheer persistence that reminded Maggie very much of herself. "You cannot keep her from everything challenging," Maggie told Mark. "She needs to test herself, to learn what she is capable of." "What she is capable of is giving me an early grave." But he let her learn, under close supervision, and Rose proved as talented at horse training as she was at riding. The ranch hands treated her with respect, teaching her properly and never condescending because of her age or gender. In 1894, tragedy struck when Sarah's husband Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack. He was only 32, leaving Sarah a widow with 2 children to raise alone. The whole family rallied around her, but Maggie saw her sister's grief and felt it echo her own old losses. "Life is not fair," Sarah said one night, sitting in Maggie's kitchen while the children slept upstairs. "I thought we were done with loss. I thought we had made it through to the safe part." "There is no safe part," Maggie said gently. "There is only loving people and accepting that love always carries the risk of loss. Is it worth it? Yes. Every time, even knowing how it hurts, I would do it all again." Sarah came to live at the ranch for several months while she decided what to do next. Eventually, she chose to keep the mercantile, hiring a manager to help her run it. She was strong, Maggie's little sister, stronger than she sometimes knew. The years rolled on. Matthew courted and married a rancher's daughter from Reno, a capable young woman named Catherine who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on ranch property and began having children of their own. Mark became a grandfather, a role he embraced with surprising enthusiasm despite his earlier claims of feeling old. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman, still fierce and independent at 17. She attracted plenty of suitors, but none seemed to meet her exacting standards. "I want what you and Papa have," she told Maggie. "That kind of partnership and respect. I will not settle for less." "Good," Maggie said firmly. "Never settle. The right person is worth waiting for." In 1899, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Maggie and Mark celebrated their 24th wedding anniversary. The children organized a party at the ranch, with neighbors and friends filling the house and yard. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. As the sun set, Mark took Maggie's hand and led her away from the celebration, up to a small rise that overlooked the ranch. From here, they could see the house glowing with lamplight, the barn and corrals, the pastures stretching to the mountains, the road leading to Carson City. 24 years, Mark said. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday we met. Other times it feels like you have been with me forever." "Both are true, I think." Maggie leaned against him. "We have built something good here. The best thing I ever did was walk into that barber shop." Mark turned her to face him. "I told myself I was just making a business decision, but I think some part of me knew that you were going to change everything." "Did I change everything? You made everything possible. Everything good in my life traces back to you. Matthew and Rose, this family we have created, the joy of coming home knowing you will be there, all of it comes from you." Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. After 24 years, he could still make her cry with his words. "I love you. I loved you then, though I tried not to. I love you now. I will love you until the day I die and beyond if such things are possible." Mark kissed her as the sun painted the sky in shades of fire, as their family celebrated below, as the land they had built their life on stretched vast and welcoming around them. It was a kiss that tasted of memory and promise, of gratitude and hope. When they finally returned to the party, Rose pulled her mother aside. "I met someone." "Oh, at the horse auction in Virginia City last week. His name is Michael Yates. He is a rancher's son, and he looked at me like I was a person with a brain instead of just a pretty face." Maggie smiled. "That sounds promising. It is early days yet, but Mama, when he talks about his plans for his family's ranch, his eyes light up the same way Papa's do. And when I told him I want to keep working with horses after I marry, he did not laugh or tell me it was not appropriate. He asked what my goals were. Then I look forward to meeting this Michael Yates. Do not embarrass me. I would never dream of it." Michael proved to be everything Rose claimed and more. He courted her properly, asking Mark's permission and treating Rose with the respect she deserved. They married the following summer in a ceremony at the ranch, with Rose radiant in a dress of ivory silk and Michael looking both terrified and elated. "There goes our last baby," Mark said, watching them dance at the reception. "They are not gone, just starting their own chapter." Maggie took his hand. "We raised them well. Now we get to see what they do with it." As the new century dawned, Maggie found herself marveling at how much had changed since that desperate day in 1875. Carson City had grown from a rough territorial capital to a thriving modern city. The ranch had expanded to become one of the largest in the state. The bakery, though now fully managed by others, still bore her mark and reputation. But more than the external changes, she marveled at the internal journey. From a terrified young woman ready to cut her hair to buy bread, she had become this: Wife, mother, grandmother, business owner, pillar of the community. She had become someone who built rather than merely survived. And it had all begun because one man had seen her worth and given her a chance to prove it. In the spring of 1902, Mark fell ill with pneumonia. For a week, Maggie barely left his side, remembering too vividly her parents' deaths and Sarah's childhood fevers. Dr. Brennan, retired now but still consulting, came daily to check on his old friend. "He is strong," Brennan assured Maggie. "He will fight through this." And Mark did, emerging from the illness thinner and older-looking but alive. Maggie held him close and thanked God for more time, more mornings waking beside him, more evenings watching the sunset together. "I am not ready to lose you," she whispered. "You will not lose me yet. I am too stubborn and I have too much to live for." Mark kissed her forehead. "We are going to grow very old together, you and I. We are going to see our grandchildren have children. We are going to celebrate 50 years of marriage and probably drive everyone crazy with our bickering and our stories. Promise, promise." They did celebrate 50 years, though it took until 1925 to get there. By then, Mark was 77 and Maggie was 72, both moving slower than they once had but still sharp and engaged with the world. The ranch was primarily run by Matthew now, though Mark still rode out to check the cattle when his health permitted. The bakery had changed hands twice but still used Maggie's recipes, still bore the reputation she had built. The anniversary celebration was massive, 3 generations gathering at the ranch that had been home to so many memories. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren ran through the house where Matthew and Rose had once played. Sarah, now 74, sat beside her sister and reminisced about their journey from California all those years ago. "Do you remember that day in the barber shop?" Sarah asked. "When you were going to cut your hair?" "I remember everything about it." Maggie looked across the room to where Mark sat surrounded by children begging for stories. "I remember being so scared and so angry at the world, and then he walked in. Best interruption ever, the very best." As the party wound down and the family gradually departed, Maggie and Mark sat on the porch where they had spent countless evenings over the past 50 years. The mountains were unchanged, eternal and beautiful. The ranch spread below, its buildings and fences and life a testament to decades of work and love. 50 years, Mark said, his voice rougher now but still the same voice that had offered her hope all those years ago. "Half a century of loving you. Do you have any regrets?" "Only that I did not meet you sooner, that I cannot have 50 more years with you." Maggie took his weathered hand in hers. They wore matching gold bands now, though hers bore the addition of an eternity ring Mark had given her on their 10th anniversary. "We have had a good run. The best." Mark lifted her hand to his lips. "From that first day to this last moment, every day with you has been a gift. You made me believe in second chances, in the possibility of joy after loss. You gave me everything that matters." "We gave each other everything," Maggie corrected. "That is how love works. Equal gifts, equal grace." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, as they had 1,000 times before. Maggie thought about the young woman she had been, ready to cut her hair to buy bread. She thought about the cowboy who had bought her a bakery and given her both. She thought about the family they had built, the life they had created, the love that had sustained them through joy and sorrow alike. It had been a good life. A hard life at times, but a good one. And it had all started with one act of kindness, one moment of seeing another person's need and choosing to help. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For saving me that day. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For giving me a chance to prove myself." Mark turned to look at her, his gray eyes still sharp despite his age. "My darling Maggie, you saved yourself. I just bought you a bakery. Everything else, everything that mattered, that was all you. We saved each other then. Yes, Mark agreed. I think we did. The stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear Rose and Michael putting their grandchildren to bed, Matthew and Catherine discussing ranch business, the comfortable sounds of family at home. This was what it was all for, Maggie thought. Not the money or the success or the recognition, but this feeling of completeness, of having loved and been loved, of having built something that would outlast them both. She was selling her hair to buy bread. The cowboy bought the bakery and gave her both. And in doing so, they had given each other everything that mattered: hope, love, partnership, family, and a life well lived together. Ready to go inside? Mark asked as the evening grew cool. In a minute. Let us stay just a little longer. Maggie leaned her head on his shoulder. I want to remember this, all of it, every perfect moment. So they stayed on the porch as night fell completely, two people who had found each other against all odds and had built a love that lasted a lifetime. They stayed until the cold drove them inside, to the warm house full of their family and their history and their future. They stayed because they had 50 years of staying together, of choosing each other every single day, of building something beautiful from that first desperate moment in a barber shop. And they would stay together, side by side, until the very end. Because that was what love meant. Not grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though those had their place, but the daily choice to remain, to support, to cherish. The cowboy had bought her the bakery all those years ago. But what Maggie had gained was so much more than bread or business or even safety. She had gained a partner, a love, a life richer than she had ever dared imagine. And as they finally went inside, Mark's arm around her waist and her head on his shoulder, Maggie Ellis Young knew that she was the luckiest woman who ever lived. Not because she had never struggled, but because she had found someone who made the struggle worthwhile. Someone who had looked at her on her worst day and had seen not her desperation but her dignity. The bakery still stood on Carson Street, a monument to her hard work. But the real monument was here in this house, in this family, in the man beside her who had loved her through every season of life. That was worth more than any amount of money, more precious than anything she could name. That was everything. And it had started with a simple question and a generous answer, with hair that did not get cut and bread that was given freely, with a cowboy who had walked into her life and had stayed forever.